In previous lessons, we have already mentioned these elements called assertions, and we had a brief introduction to the concept to see why it is important to include them in our scripts. So let's now see how to work with these elements in JMeter. JMeter provides different types of assertions, but we will be focusing on the ones we use the most. The response assertion is the most common one, and it allows us to search for a text in our server's response. The size assertion tests that each response contains a certain number of bytes in it. We can specify that that size be equal to, greater than, less than, or not equal to a given number of bytes. And the duration assertion tests that each response was received within a given amount of time. Any response that takes longer than this certain number of milliseconds, which is specified by the user, will be marked as a failed response. So now we know that the assertions are a way to validate that a response from our server doesn't have an error. We will now see an example of how to add an assertion in our JMeter script. Let's then go to the open card site and try to identify a text that will come when we load the site. As an example, let's look for this Intel Core 2 Duo processor. As we've said before, we're going to be using Fiddler to debug and search for assertions. So let's go to Fiddler and try and find this text in the response from the server. Let's copy the text on the search bar to see exactly how it comes in the response. And going back to JMeter, we'll be able to add the assertion. To do this, we need to right-click on the request, go to Add Assertions, and we're going to be adding a response assertion. Once we've added it, we can edit the name. We'll normally use the text that we're searching for, so it's easy to know what we're trying to validate. Here you can say to which sample we'll be applying the assertion to, and which response field we want to test. In this case, we're going to be validating the text response, but we could also want to validate the response code or the headers. And we also need to specify the pattern matching rules. In our case, we want our response to contain the text Intel Core. So let's click here to add a pattern. We'll copy the text. Let's save our test and we'll run it to see what happens. We can see here that the request was run successfully. We have a response code 200, and you can see the request made to the server and the response that we got back. As we have a green tick on the request, it means that the text that we introduced was found. So let's verify that. Let's type it there on our search bar and see that it is included in the response from the server. So now let's see what happens if the response from the server has an error. Let's introduce the error by changing the port number in the request. And let's run it to see what happens. It's taking some time to run the test because it's making a request to a port in which our application is not listening in. We can see that the request is marked in red, which means there was an error. It's indicating us that the text wasn't found in the response. If we check the response from the server, we'll see there is a HTTP host connect exception, saying that our connection was refused. As we have seen that this request takes some time to be processed, we're going to add a duration assertion to see how that works. So let's right-click on our request and add the assertion. And we're going to type there 500 milliseconds. What we are indicating with that is the maximum accepted time. So once we run the test, we'll be able to see that not only we have the response assertion error, but now we have a duration error. It is indicating us that the operation lasted too long. So a very easy way to see if a request failed is to check on the icon. If you have a green tick, it means that it passed. And if it is red, it means that it failed and it's going to give us information about the error. So we have seen that it is quite easy to add assertions to our requests. On the next article, we will explain how to identify good assertions to add to our scripts.